We're in the current Daf in Psachim Daf Ayin Ches, 2 lines down for the top of the Yomid. But the Gemara continues the discussion of a previous Mishnah, which in the previous Daf we discussed Nimastin B'lei Rabbi Shua. Now the Gemara will discuss a different question, Nimastin B'lei Rabbi Yesi. A whole, again, another cheshbon regarding the halach of our Mishnah, that it's seemingly like not like a different time. I should have caused by the Kazakh, the Chesed to enter, but the Chesed we're doing this for today's Daf. Some of the things we're discussing today's Daf are that of Rabbi Yesi regarding carbons being brought by Tumah, that he holds in the tzit miratza ala achilos. The carbon pesach of an individual that became partially tummy. The Gemara distinguishes between meat becoming tummy and chayla becoming tummy. The Gemara concludes with the opinion of Rabbi Nassim that it's not ma'akiv the eating of the carbon pesach, which I think is significant regarding the halacha of the carbon pesach being run in the state of a tumah. Some important terms of the concept we have are shtar mizak lebetray, which is it's a phrase of like, can you really merit a document for two parties, either one or the other? How is Rabbi Yesi on the previous stop saying Hosek Eliezer and Hosek B'Shua when they're both contradictory? And Shalom because of Akiv is Allah when the pasuk repeats something 2 times, it's telling you that's an Akiv that's integral. So begin the current daf. Ayin Chesed Aleph. Second line, says the Gemara like this. Let's say our Mishnah that said that you have 5 karbanis. That was the title of our previous Mishnah. That even though they're born in the state of Tumah, but they're not eaten, so you see that you could go ahead and, even though it's not eaten, it can be brought in the state of Tumah, that's still like Rabbi Yesi. Not like Rabbi Yesi. Why? Because time in the Brisa. Well, that's why he says, Hatzis Maras Alachilas. He says, we discussed this at length in the previous time, that says atones for the Tumah of even things that were eaten, that are eaten things you could go ahead and eat it even in the state of Tumah. He says, no, it does not go ahead and provide it that it's going to validate it to be eaten. Tumah does not work for things that are eaten. No. So you would think to say, and this is the Gemara's assumption, the Kamer Beast, in fact, the he says, it's like a lump that's over here. From the fact the Beast says, that the tzit does not provide atonement for what's eaten. Now, obviously, you have to say, that he holds like Bishua, that he says, being a tartan, that you need to have both dam and basar. Because if you don't need basar, then why would you tell me that it's not meratz on achilas, as if I need achilas? Why do you need ritzi on achilas if it's not an integral part? Obviously, your presumption is that you need to have basar, and you tell me, if it becomes tummy, it's not going to be meratz, it's not going to be okay. So based on that premise, name mahashta, so let's say now I must need like Rabbi Yesi, that I mission like Rabbi Yesi. Why? Because he holds that if the basar becomes tummy, the tzitz is not effective on it, right? Because the basar is the nachal, and he just said, recorded in the Brisa, it says that it's not maratza on the chilas to make it as if the basar is around to be able to throw the blood. And we proved that he holds like a b'shu because if he wouldn't require both, then why would you tell me if there's tzitz or not on the achilas? What do you mean? Even without the achilas, it's valid to go and spray the blood without it. So if you're telling me that it's not maratza on the achilas, obviously, but in general you need it, so you see that he needs both. And if that's the case, then obviously telling my Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yesi, because our Mishnah is telling us that even though the meat became tummy, you could still go ahead and spray the blood. But according to Rabbi Yesi, that he says that you need to have both. Obviously, our Mishnah is not like him because our Mishnah is saying that you can be able to spray the blood even though the meat was tummy, and he holds there's no ritz tzitz on the achilas. Again, it's very similar to the Gemara's discussion on previous Daf when we want to say the Mishnah not like Rabbi Shua. So the Gemara like, no. Rabbi Yesi Rabbi Eliezer spray like. Rabbi Yesi holds like Rabbi Eliezer in regards to a different machlek. He's not obviously in this price. He's disagreeing with Rabbi Eliezer regarding what's matzah and achilas or not. He holds like Rabbi Eliezer not like Rabbi Shua, not like that you need both as we just assumed a second ago. No, the amadam of a bishem basar. He holds that you could spray the blood even though there's no available meat, and with one it's going to be sufficient, as the halacha of our Mishnah is indicating, where you could spray the blood even though the meat is tummy. Which later on the Gemara is going to ask and say, so wait a second, one of the cases of the Mishnah was shtei halechem, that it's all achilos, and then you're not going to have even one thing. In other words, you could tell me you have dam even though there's no basar, because you have at least one of them. You have the matzah even though you don't have the nitr. Okay, that's what Rabbi Eliezer says. What do you do with shtei halechem? Shtei halechem, nothing is brought in the It's all achilas. It's all, and you tell me it's not maratza on achilas. So how could you be the time of the Mishnah to say, oh, you could bring a betumah? Bring what betumah? To eat it? It sits in maratza on achilas. But that's what the Gemara is going to ask later on. But for now, the Gemara is saving faith for Rabbi Yesi. For Rabbi Yesi, saying he could be the time of the Mishnah. But then says the Gemara, well, wait a second. If Rabbi Yesi only Eliezer, not like the way we presumed originally in our interpretation. So for what halachic purpose is Rabbi Yossi saying in this brisa that the tzitz is not a piece for the edible items? Why do you need tzitz on the edible items if you told me there's not ma'akiv in the avodah of the carbon? You could do the dam even though there's no basar. Says the Gemara, wait a second, according to your reasoning, I could ask the same question on you. Rabbi Lezer says in this brisa that the tzitz meratz on the chilois, but himself, as you just quoted from the previous Daf Yomi, he says dam ava b'shem basar. He holds that you can spray the blood even though there's no meat. So tzitz meratz on the chilos malachasa. For what halacha do you need to say tzitz meratz on the chilos? You don't need the chilos. You tell me it works even without that. So the Zelba Kashi can figure in Rabbi Lezer Alein. What are you asking on Rabbi Yossi? What's he going to do with it? Rabbi Lezer himself would be contradictory. Why do you need meratz al chilos? You don't even need the chilos itself. So Ella rather says, obviously I could prove from Rabbi Lezer, and that'll help us understand Rabbi Yossi, that the reeds of the tzitz of the achilas is not, as we had originally assumed, to validate the zrika, to be able to go ahead and be fulfill the obligation of the bailam by doing a valid carbon. No, it's not true. It has nothing to do with that. It's even without the eatings that it would be valid, like we said, because dam, according to Rabbi Lezer, let's say, would be alpha b'shein basar. Rather, you need it for the eating of the achilas themselves, meaning not related to the validity of the carbon. For the element of these, let's say this meat itself, what we call the achilas, for it itself, there's a necessity of saying if it's marutza or not. How so? L'mikvei b'pigel, to go ahead and establish it as pigel, which the halacha tells us, Menachas Daf Tezayin, that if there's another invalidation in a carbon that you already had a machshava of pigel, actually, almost paradoxical, the carbon's not going to be pigel to be liable carbs for eating it. Why? Because the Gemara tells us, it says in the pasuk Yiratza, which tells us the klal what's known as kartzas kasher kachatzas pigel. The way a kosher carbon is valid, which is that you do all the avodas appropriately, that's the only way a carbon will become pigel. But if you do a different machshava in the carbon of pigel, it's actually not going to be pigel. So it has to be valid. Regarding pigel, it's going to have a relevance if there's ritz that sits on the chilos or not. And also a second thing, ulafuke, and also regarding precluding this meat midei me'ilah from the law of misappropriation. Now, by kachim, by karbanas, the throwing of the blood permits the meat to be eaten by the khan. And only once the blood is thrown, then the meat is not called kachesh anymore, and it doesn't have any more halacha misappropriation. That's kamiflagi, that's the relevancy of if there's ritza tzitz on the chilos or not. Again, because it's not relevant to regarding the spraying of the blood, meaning regarding doing that like that. We're saying Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Lezer both agree that you could do dam af b'shein basar. So what's the relevance? Regarding these two things, they want to explain Rabbi Lezer, so he holds meratz tzitz levei, that yes, the tzitz does appease for the tumah of the meat, of the nechalin, of the things that are eaten, umashvele kitar. So it makes the meat like as if it's not tummy, as if it's tar. Now, Rashi points out, although obviously you cannot eat it because it is tummy, but for all other halachic purposes, we consider as tar, and therefore the zrika is effective, meaning the kavalei bepigel. So that means to say that this meat will become pigel because there is no other problem about tumah, and therefore the zrika tam will also work for it. Say that there's no more me'ilah if you go and you misappropriate, unless you go take and have benefit from this meat and you sit on it, use it like a couch, you're not going to have me'ilah because it was like it was tar. Rabbi Yossi, he holds that you're right, although the zrika itself is going to be valid to fulfill the owner's obligations for that, that's what we're saying. When we see damav b'shem basar, means to say that it's a valid carbon and he fulfills his obligation, but for that you don't need to have both the dam and the basar. But regarding the meat itself, they're actually loy meratza tzitzilaveh. That this is not going to be effective to make that this zrika is going to help to say, okay, because when you do zrika, that establishes it as pigel, and it also, now when you do a zrika of a carbon, it removes it from the ilah. No. V'loy mashlei kitar. When you spray the blood, it's not going to make this animal as tar. V'loy kavalei bepigel, it's not going to establish a pigel. V'loy mapulim ne'me'ilah, it's not going to go ahead and remove from me'ilah, because for those purposes, the tzitz is not meratza nechilas. And if it's not meratza nechilas, you're right, you don't need it for the zrika of the dam. The dam has to be b'shein basar. He doesn't hold like a bishua. He holds like a really as he could be the time of the mission. You could do the avoid the karbanas even though there's no basar. So what's he saying? It's not meratza nechilas. For what halacha? They need it to be merutza for pigel and for me'ilah. Because when you do the zrika the dam, is that going to make it that there's no more me'ila anymore? According to Rabbi Yossi, there is going to be me'ila because the zrika is not helping anything because this thing is a tummy item. A tummy item is not going to go ahead and become permitted to remove it from me'ila because it's tummy. It's not permitted. Whereas according to Rabbi Lezer, yeah, you're not going to have me'ila anymore because it was removed from its problem because we consider like tahar. And if it's tar, so then it's the zrika works for it, and therefore it's going to be pigel if let's say a machshava pigel, and it's not going to have me'ila anymore once you do the zrika dam. But the Gemara continues to ask. It says, Maskimor of Mari. Mari asks, he says, okay, Nehina mit Rabbi Yossi Sabik Rebelez. And again, this is all a cheshbon trying to figure out, can we say the Tana of the Mishnah is like Rabbi Yossi? Just like we went through all cheshbon in the previous time. Can the Mishnah be like Rabbi Shul? So, okay, I get it. So far you're saying that he could be the Tana of the Mishnah because he holds like Rabbi Eliezer. That you're telling me, yeah, dam ava b'shein basar. So when you bring a regular carbon, ziv chishal mitzibur, and you're bringing it, so the animal is tum on the carbon, fine. But you could do the dam and the tzitz and meratza on the dam, even though he holds tum techuye b'tzibur, and the meat, okay. He also realizes that dam ava b'shein basar. You could do the dam even though there's no basar, fine. But that is only b'shlam ezvach. That works well for the case in the Mishnah that are animal carbonas, where it could dam. There is something over here that is being permitted. There is what's called the oilam. The dam and the chelim are both being merutza from the tzitz, and you have two things. You have the actual dam, and you have the chelim. So there are things over here that are being permitted because all the Rabbi Yossi holds is not merutza, is the nechal, are things that are eaten. But regarding everything else, it's meratza, which is the oiler. Now, oimer nami. Also, the other case of the oimer, ekakainitz. You have the kemitza, which is the fistful. That the tzitz is meratza. So you at least have one thing that is being, again, when you're doing an avoid, you're doing a carbon. There has to be something over here that is being done. So, at least by the animal carbonas, or even by the oimer, which is not animal carbon, you have the fistful, that at least that's oilim, that's being put on the mizbeach. Let's say the 12 showbreads from the shulchan. There's at least the spoonfuls of frankincense, which they're the matir of the bread, like the kaimitz is for the mincha, as the pasuk says, which the bezichim, the spoonfuls of frankincense of the lechem upon them, as it says by the kemitza, the hikdar kainis is kirasa, the tzitz meratza, because those are the oilim, and Rabbi Yossi agrees that if it's not nachalim, if it's oilim, so it's going to be the machaper, these things, and it's going to be the matur. But the two breads that are brought in Shavuos, which is all achilas. Rabbi Yossi, remember, says that ain't a tzitz meratza al achilas. Again, a lot of cheshbon in these dafim over here. Again, he says that the tzitz is not meratza on nachalim. So Michael, then what are you going to say over there? You don't have nothing. Forget about if you hold yesh, main basa yesh dam, that just blood alone is enough. But there's blood at least. It's got to be something that you're doing. Vas is the carbon if there's nothing here that's being permitted. The whole shtei halechem is all about eating. There's nothing that's put on the mizbeach, and you hold it by nachalim, there's no ritzitzitz. So how can you be the Tan in the Mishnah? I understand by the other cases that there's something that's being permitted over here, that are oilim, that are going in the mizbeach, and that you hold that there's ritzitzitz. But by shtei halechem, there's nothing here that's being validated. And Bechitim, maybe you're going to say that, when the Mishnah said that the shtei halechem would come in the state of tumah, it wasn't talking about the shtei halechem itself when it comes independently. Like, for example, when there's no lambs around, the Gemara Menachas says that the two breads are by themselves brought as the carbon. No, says the Gemara, it wasn't those two shtei halechem that the Mishnah was saying that it comes in the state of tumah. Rather, it was la korav mohen. With the shtei halechem, there's a lambs, kavasim, that come with them. And because they actually come with the lambs, it's actually the slaughtering of those lambs that actually sanctify the shtei halechem on Shavuos. And when you spray the blood of those animals, it permits the breads to be eaten, as the Mishnah says, that they're bois betumah, because the tzitz is meratza on those karbanos. You're right, shtei halechem is nachal, it can't be meratza on that. But maybe when it says that the shtei halechem is bois betumah, it means to say the blood of the kivsiyat says is brought with it. So wait a second, if that's the case, hainu shal tzibur. That's one of the other cases in the Mishnah of the shal tzibur, which is the kivsiyat says that are brought on Shavuos. And that's the lambs that are brought together with the Shtei Alechem. Simkain, if that's what you mean when it says Shtei Alechem, it really means the Kivsei Atzeres, Havla Arba. So then there's only 4. Vanach HaMishnah, we said there's 5. Not 5, it's 4. The Kivsei Atzeres and the Shtei Alechem is really the same case. You tell me it's not really Shtei Alechem. You tell me it's really Shtei Alechem you can't eat. It's tummy. You tell me it's really the Kivsei Atzeres that comes with it. So then it's only 4, not 5. So Elorada says the Gemara, Ksab Rabbi Yisi actually holds that Tumah Hutshu B'tzibra. That you have to say that Tumah is actually not like we had assumed up until now. That as the premise we're going from the previous stuff of Tumah T'chuyi B'tzibra, it's overridden. No, Tumah is totally permitted. You don't need the tzitz. Timuratz on the chilas. It's as if the carbon is tar. So he could be the Tan the Mishnah. Because this was in the Mishnah that Bo'is B'tumah, yeah, because Tumah is mutter. So although the tzitz namaratza on the chilas, you don't need ritzui. So carbon tzibur doesn't need ritzui. It's not a problem in the first place. It says the Gemara, how can you say this? By the time to learn the Brisa. Echad zeh ve'echad zeh. This is referring to 2 types of kahanim that have to separate themselves. They have to quarantine for 7 days. The kohen who burns the paraduma, and the kohen gadol b'yom kippurim, each one of them have to quarantine for 7 days. And the halacha is mazna lov kol shiva. So we spray him all 7 days, which in the first parak in Yoma, the Gemara explains that why does he have to be sprayed with the purification waters of the paraduma? Because the first day that we quarantine him, we have to be concerned maybe it's 3rd day of his tumah, meaning maybe it's 3 days since he became a tummy from a dead person, which is just a concern, and it's like an added mila that they do. But maybe he's a tummy mess, and a tummy mess has to be sprayed on day 3 and day 7. So the first day he's there, maybe it's really day 3. Day 2 is maybe also day 3. Maybe day 3 is also maybe 3. And the rest of the days, each day we're not sure, maybe it's the 7th day of his tumah. So therefore every single day he has to be sprayed. Mikol chatoy shoyisham. From all the...
They do before the first one. For the first paraduma.
Before the first paraduma, and Moshe Rabbeinu is by the...
There was no
Right. So they didn't have that mala, right? So from all the ashes of the paradumas that they had in the Beis Hamikdash, as Rashi says, even the ashes of the Moshe Rabbeinu, that never was used up. So all the paradumas that they did in all of history, they would take a little bit of all them all and would spray the kohen gadol or this kohen who was burning the paraduma every single day from those. That's the Reb Meir. Rabbi Yisam, he says no. He says they only would spray the kohen, whichever one it was, day 3 and day 7. Because if you're concerned, okay, day 3, day 7. But one thing says the Gemara, if you say Rabbi Yissi holds Tuma Hutshu B'tzibur, Tuma, you just have to say to answer how it could be the Tana Mishnah. The Tuma is not Duchuya, it's Hutshu, it's permitted. It's like nothing, it's not a problem. So Limali has no klal. Why do you have to, he's saying you don't have to do every single day, you can do just day 3 and day 7. You have to be so machmer. But why would you spray Yisrael in the first place? The Korban Yom Kippurim is a Korban Tzibur and it's Deicha Tumah. Obviously it basically holds that no, with great difficulty was Tumah overridden, nitches, and that is that you need the tzitz to be meratza. So wait a second, that's the case. Since Rabbi Yissi holds that the tzitz not meratza on achilas, so back to the question, the case of Shtei Alechem of our Mishnah cannot be like Rabbi Yissi, because even if he would say it's sufficient with one, like we call the concept im ein basa yesh dam, but you don't have one, because there's Shtei Alechem, nothing else is being brought on the mizbeach. It's clear, must be like Rabbi Yissi. Yes, the Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yissi, because, as we pointed out, it wouldn't be, our Mishnah would have to hold that this Richard sits on the, whatever, at least cannot be like Rabbi Yissi, because Rabbi Yissi holds that Tumah is Duchuya and Ein Meratza al Achilas. With that combination, you cannot be like the Allah of Mishnah. Now, going back to what we said in the previous Daf, we had quoted Rabbi Yissi an interesting statement that he said. Only Papa Labaya. In our discussion, when we were explaining for Rabbi Shua, we wanted to prove something in Rabbi Shua. We then quoted a brisa. Rabbi Yisrael was saying, "Oh, I see his opinion, this one. I see his opinion, that one." And from there, we proved that Rabbi Shua held that the same thing is not only by zvachim, it's even by manach. But the Gemara now goes and discusses this brisa and finds it difficult. The brisa said, only a couple of says Rabbi Yisrael shtar mezakeh lebeitrehu. Is he going to merit a document to both parties? How could a document be given to the claimant and to the defendant? Because Rabbi Yissi is saying, I see his words and I hear his words, and he's saying both of them. This time we learn the brisa, we're going to quote the whole brisa. Rabbi Yissi said, and that's what we're asking on Rabbi Yissi, He said, Royani is different Rabbi Elazar. He says, I see the opinion of Rabbi Elazar by animal karbanas. I see the opinion of Rabbi Shua by animal karbanas. And the different Rabbi Elazar, I see the opinion of Rabbi Elazar by flower offerings. I see the opinion of Rabbi Shua by flower offerings, as the Gemara explained, as he says in the Bryce. What do I mean? Says Rabbi Yisrael like this. Different Elazar, I see the opinion of Elazar that he would say, yeah, you can spray the blood even though there's no meat. Different I also hold like Rabbi Shua by Zvachim, showing me that he would say, which everyone agrees to, Imein Dam Ein Basa. If there's no blood, you can't have the meat. And also, Imein Basa Ein Dam. If there's no meat, there's no dam. So he just contradicted himself regarding Zvachim. Do you hold like Rabbi Eliezer that you don't need the meat, or the other Rabbi Shua that you do need the meat, and if there's no meat, there's no dam? Fine. Second half of a statement, Rabbi Eliezer, it appears to me the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer by flour offering, that he would say, that you could put the fistful of the flour offering on the mizbech, even though there's no leftovers, got lost, got burnt. And Rabbi Shua Menachas, and I hold like Rabbi Shua by the flour offerings, that he would say, which everyone agrees to, Sham Shirayim, which actually no, this is what he disagrees. In ancient Shirayim in Kaimitz, if there's no leftovers, there's no festivals, that just contradicted what he said to Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar says that you don't need the leftovers. Here he's saying, like, I'm sure that you do need leftovers. And this second half is what everyone agrees to. In main Kaimitz in Shirayim, there's no festival, there's no leftovers, but he just contradicted himself. How could you can't say a document is both ways? You can't say it's like Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shua when they both disagree. So Amalei Sabai says, he says, Mistabra Kama. What does that mean? So Rashi explained, Mistabra means to say, it's logical that the two Tanoim, Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shua, that they disagree by both cases, as the Gemara explains. Kikoi B'Zvachim, when Rabbi Yossi was learning the machlekes regarding the halacha of karbanas, he would say, it's mistaba logical, just like Rabbi Shua and Rabbi Elazar disagree regarding animal karbanas, and that if you need the basar or not, meaning the shirayim, the thing that's being nitter, they would have the same machlekes regarding menachas. And koi menachas, when Rabbi Yossi was learning menachas, so would say, it's logical, just like they disagree regarding menachas, they also disagree regarding zvach. And that's what he meant to say, royani. He said, it seems to me that this machlekes, and he quoted both the Rabbi Shua and Rabbi Elazar, that they also disagree there too. And also when he would say the other one, he said, so it's not regarding that he likes each opinion. He's quoting that, to the machlekes, and he's saying that it's by both contexts. But however, Amalei Papa says to Abaye, he says, I don't understand your answer. Hatenach, I could understand, ki koi bezvachim, when Rabbi was learning zvachim. He would say, mistab, it's logical, ki hecha de pligi bezvachim, just like they have a dispute regarding animal karbanas. Pligi nam menachas, that they also disagree regarding flower offerings. Why? Because the ikka korek, see, the primary psukim that are written regarding where they had the dispute, which we explained in the previous stuff, of the pasuk vasisa elasecha abasav adam, which, if you recall, that was machlekes habasav adam. What does habasav adam come to teach you? That you have to have the basar and the dam. Or no, even if dam of b'shem basar, just comparing the basar to the dam, that's just like dam has to be bizrikum, so the basar has to be bizrikum. But that was the psukim, that was the source of the machlekes of if you have to have the basar with the dam or not. So I could understand the primary psukim bezvachim ksivi are written by animal karbanis, which is dam, that's what the pasuk there is talking about by spraying the blood, but it doesn't say anything in the context of menachas. So you would have to tell us, okay, even though it doesn't say it by menachas, but menachas is the equivalent of zvachim, that they would have the same machlekes there too. Is there enough to have the matter, or do you have to also have the nitter that's being permitted? But like but if you're telling me that he's learning menachas and he's saying, you know what, the son, mistab, it's logical, just like they disagree regarding menachas, pligi nam bezvachim, they also disagree regarding zvachim. What are you talking about? Making kreb zvachim, they say that is where the prime are by zvachim. You can't tell me that. I think the taka, they also disagree by zvachim. That is where that's the sources. You can't tell me he's learning menachas and think that also is by zvachim. The zvachim to menachas, yes, not menachas to zvachim. So Rav Lekasha, Rav Papa gives a different interpretation. What did Rabbi Yossi mean to say? These contradictory statements. He says, Royani is Dibri Rabbi Eliezer benitma. He says, it appears to me, the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, there was three cases essentially. There was when the meat becomes tummy, when it gets burnt, or gets lost. So Rabbi Yossi was differentiating in the case that they disagree about in menachas. He was saying, I hold like one in one, but like the other one in the other cases. So he says, it appears to me correct, Rabbi Eliezer, when the meat became tummy. But if Rabbi Shua, like Rabbi Shua, that it's going to be ma'akev if you have no meat, if it's lost or burnt. Because that makes sense, because when it's tummy, it's still there. So okay, then it's going to work. When it got lost or burnt, then I'll look at Rabbi Shua, then it's not going to work anymore. It's not going to be valid if there's no meat. But the Gemara has a difficulty with this, because, wait a second. Benitma my time. What's the reason why you're telling me that Rabbi Yisrael holds like Rabbi Eliezer when the meat became tummy, that it will be valid, because the Meratzi tzitz. Because, okay, the meat became tummy, so what? It's also like it's not here, just like it got lost. No. The tzitz is Meratza on the meat. So it's going to be okay. But you can't say that. Hasham Rabbi Yisrael, we already quoted Rabbi Yisrael saying that Ein HaTzitz Meratza Lechilas. This started off the daf. That we said that the tzitz is not going to appease for things that are eaten, which is what the buster is when it becomes tummy. So what's the maila of you saying like Rabbi Eliezer when it became tummy? It's just like getting lost. It's not available. It's invalid. So Ella Rabbi says, you're right. Like kasher, it's a different answer. Ryan is the Rabbi Eliezer b'tzibur. What was Rabbi saying? He holds like either contradictory opinions. Depends for what. He says, I hold like Rabbi Eliezer when it's a carbon tzibur. Where there you're right. There you don't need the meat. Ryan is the Rabbi Yeshua b'yachid. When do I hold like Rabbi Yeshua that it is going to be ma'akiv if the meat becomes tummy? Is by a yachid, by individual. He says, wait, I have a difficulty with this too. But tzibur my time. Why tell my tzibur that if it became tummy, that then you would say like Rabbi Eliezer, because Mashum de Tumah Hutra b'tzibur, because you would tell me, by tzibur, then it's mutter. And then you don't need the tzitz in Meratza, because you don't hold the tzitz in Meratza Nachilas, but you don't need the Meratza, because it's a tzibur. So wait a second, we have two problems with this. Chada, first of all, the Shaman of Rabbi Yissi, we already had Rabbi Yissi, as we said, Dominic says, Tumah D'chuya b'tzibur. He doesn't know Tumah is B'hutra b'tzibur, it's only D'chuya. So you need the tzitz in Meratza, and tzitz is not Meratza no Eichlin. So that doesn't work. Moreover, is if you're telling me that when is Rabbi Yissi saying like Rabbi Eliezer in his dispute with Rabbi Shua is only in the case of when it's by a tzibur, so then I don't understand. You're telling me Rabbi Eliezer machshir, and that's what you tell me. I roy on these davar. I agree with Rabbi Eliezer when it's done with tzibur because he holds his kasher. And not Rabbi Shua. In other words, you're not holding like Rabbi Shua as if he disagrees in that case. And what Rabbi Shua would hold that if it was a carbon tzibur, that then he would hold that it's going to be puzzle. But as you continue to debate, but you said that b'tzibur afil Rabbi Shua ma'ida. The beginning of Amen Aleph said that Rabbi Shua agrees that it's b'tzibur, which we had quoted from the previous daf. The beginning of Amen Aleph, we said on the top of the Amen, we said Eloloi Kasha. The first words on the line was kam b'yachid kam b'tzibur. Wait, so Rabbi Shua says it's a problem only by Yachid. You mean to say he agrees by Tzibur? So then how can you say that you agree to Rabbi Eliezer, not like Rabbi Shua, when it's done by Tzibur, that then it's going to be okay? But Rabbi Shua himself doesn't disagree in that case. Why would you say you agree to Rabbi Eliezer? He agrees by Tzibur. So then this is a different approach. Okay, you're right. Both of them are talking about by a Yachid, by an individual, but one's talking about the Ketchila, and one's talking about the Yachid. Meaning like this. Said Rabbi Yissi, Raini as Divri Rabbi Eliezer b'diavad. When do I, they're disagreeing, but he's choosing one over the other. When I agree with Rabbi Eliezer, that's not going to akiv if the basta became tummy b'diavad after the fact. But I hold like Yeshua l'katchila initially. So that's how he's able to say like both. They're disagreeing. Is it okay if the basta became tummy or not? It says I hold like Rabbi Eliezer b'diavad. I hold like Yeshua l'katchila. That's going to be a problem. Says the Gemara diavad. You're telling me. After the fact, what do you mean? How can you say you hold like Rabbi Eliezer b'diavad? Rabbi Shua himself, who says that it's a problem, main basay and dam, is also only like a tchila. He himself was it's okay b'diavad. He's not like in the brisa. Rabbi Shua, we had quoted this previously. Rabbi Shua agrees. Shin zart that if he did spread, then it's going to be okay. And we'd explained that brisa was talking about a yachid. So he himself, how can you say that's what you hold like Rabbi Eliezer? He himself would agree over there b'diavad. Says the Gemara, no. This that we said Rabbi Shua agrees that b'diavad is going to be valid is b'tumah. That's the case he's talking about over there. And why by tumah is going to be valid? Because it's around. You're right. It's not necessarily going to be that it's not a problem but tumah, but it's still extant. It's there. You see it. So that's what he says. Even though a main basa in dam, really you shouldn't be able to do it. But b'diavad, okay, it's going to be merutz. But this Rabbi is saying I hold the Rabbi Eliezer is ba'avad v'saref. If the leftovers are not just tummy, they got burnt or got lost. That's what we're saying, that if you went and you subsequently went and burnt the kamitza, it's going to be kosher. Because the Gemara explains. When we learn what Yeshua agrees, Shem Zarkor said that if you did it after the fact and you sprayed the blooding and so it's going to be okay. It's benitma if the shiraim were tummy. But if it was burnt or lost, then no, it's not going to work even b'diavad. Rabbi Yossi, when Rabbi Yossi say the right is Rabbi Lezer, that I agree with Rabbi Lezer with the Yevon, that's even ba'avad v'sav, that's even when it was lost or burnt. And therefore, Rabbi Yossi's statement is not a contradiction. He was saying that he holds like one regarding that of Likatchil and that of the Yevon. In which case, but doesn't Rabbi Shua agree with the Yevon? No, he doesn't agree by the case of avad v'sav. And that is where he still holds like Rabbi Lezer, that it is going to work with the Yevon, even by avad v'sav, not like Rabbi Shua. Take a deep breath. Now we go on to the halacha of the next Mishnah, which continues on the halachas of Tumah of Karbanis, because again we brought in the previous Mishnah because we were saying that this Mishnah also contains a Karban Pesach. We're finding discrepancies of the laws of Karban Pesach, because that's the title of this parak, Kate Tzayil, we're getting ready to roast the Karban, bring the Karban. We were talking about, as in the previous Mishnah, we said the Karban Pesach could even be eaten in the state of Tumah, unlike all those other Karbanis Tibur. Here our Mishnah says another related halacha. Nitma Basar. If the meat of the Karban Pesach became Tameh, so, and the chel of kain and the fat is still around, in his ark is a dam. So you don't spray the blood. Even according to Eliezer, who he says you dam afa pishein basar, he would agree over here that by the Karban Pesach you cannot spray the blood. Why? Because the whole point of the Karban Pesach is for the people to eat it. If there's no meat, because it's tameh, then you're not spraying the blood. Let's see. Oh, so the Gemara is going to discuss that. But it would seem to be, because that's the whole point of the Karban Pesach, is to eat it. We bring it so we can eat it by the Seder night. If there's no meat to be eaten, so what are you doing spraying the blood? It's not a kapara. Normally you'd say you spray the blood because it's going to be a kapara, it's going to do something. What's tittus? It's not doing anything, there's no meat over here. So what are you spraying the blood for? So the Gemara is going to get into discussion regarding that. But let's say nitma chil abasakam. Let's say the fats which are burned on this death, they became tummy, but the meat is around. Okay, so I guess then you spray the blood. You have the mata, you have the nitter, and the main point is the eating. But it says the Mishnah Ubi Mugdash and Anakim. By regular Karbanis, not Karban Pesach, it's actually not like that. And that is even according to Rabbi Shua, who says that you need dam and basar. It's exactly the opposite of the Karbanis. Even if the meat became tummy and the fats are around, Zorik is a dam, you would spray the blood. Because again, Rabbi Shua requires two things. He requires a matir, which is the dam, and the shirayim, which are what's being permitted. Now, although there's no basar, because the basar is tummy, but the dam is permitting the imurim, the sacrificial parts, so that's the two elements that he needs, matzah and nitter, and that's going to be okay. So unlike the Karban Pesach, which if the meat is tamei and the chayil is kam, you don't spray the blood. Here, no, even if the meat is tamei, but the chayil is kam, you're going to spray it because you just need to have one of the nitarim, even the country to be sure. Now, the Gemara tells us that although we said in the Mishnah that you cannot spray the blood if the carbon is tamei, if the meat is tamei, but Amar of Gilom Rabbi says im zarak. Let's say you did spray it if the meat is tamei. So hurtza. So after the fact, it's going to be accepted, and he's going to be exempt from being a Pesach Sheni after the fact. So it's the fact to give him a ben achila. What are you talking about? I have to eat the Karban Pesach. The meat is tamei. You're not eating this. So how you yotzi yichiv? So the achila ma'akva. Eating the Karban Pesach is not ma'akav v'kapar b'di'evet, and it's going to work. I will say, it's going to be awfully every man according to what he could eat. You see, you have to. Says, well, that's a mitzvah, but it's. Says, well, Akav like you tell me it's not Akav, does not withhold the validity of his obligation. But the Tanya, in the Bryce, it says the pasuk says the in the counting of the number. That teaches that Karban Pesach could only be slaughtered if it has people numbered. You have a guy who's listed on that as a group. That the word michsas is like a number. He has to be counted on that Karban Pesach. Now, Yochel says the Brisa, Yochel Shachta Shlim. You would think, okay, let's say a guy was slaughtered for someone who was not counted he was not on the title of this Karban Pesach, and they slaughtered for him. You would think, okay, he could a mitzvah kosher. Okay, he violated a mitzvah that it should be limud, but it's still gonna be kosher. No, it's not even kosher. It says again, every man according to what he eat, it should be counted. So it says b'michsas and techaisu. Hakasav shalom of la'akiv. The pasuk is repeating a concept two times, which are telling us that it's ma'akiv. Now, so we see that if you do it shloilam nuyav, it's going to be puzzle. Moreover, the iskish eichlin, the halacha of eaters, which is, let's say, they're elderly or they're sick, which they can't not eat, the pasuk appears lemenuyan to those who, regarding being counted, because they're mentioned in the same context of the pasuk. And by menuyav, it's ma'akiv. So eichlin is also ma'akiv. So you see that eating it is ma'akiv. So how can you tell me that the guy's fulfilling his obligation if he can't eat it? Because tell me. So the other brother says the Gemara Rav, that holds the eating of the Pesach is obviously not ma'akiv, and that's why he holds you fulfill your obligation. He's the Amakir of Nasan. He holds Reb Nasan. But he says, you're right. It would seem to be that eating in the Pesach is ma'akiv, as we brought from the previous brayso. But Rav, who's saying it is okay, holds like a different Tana. Reb Nosson holds that eating the Pesach is not ma'akiv. Says Reb Nosson. Which Reb Nosson is this? Even Reb Nosson, if it's the following, the Tanya, like in the brayso, Reb Nosson, he says, "Minayin shekol Yisrael yitzim Pesach." How do you know that the whole Jewish people can fulfill their obligation? One animal, one Korban Pesach. God's Klal Yisrael can be yitzim their chiyuv. Tamlin says the pasuk in Shemais. They call you up before Pesach, so you want to join the Korban Pesach this year. How many people are on this? God's Klal Yisrael. How do you know this? It says because they're going to slaughter all of the assembly of the Jewish people. Bein Arbaim in the afternoon of Erev Pesach. What do you think? God's Klal Yisrael is shechting? Only one person is shechting it. And rather is teaching that God's Klal Yisrael can fulfill the obligation with one Korban Pesach, even though obviously there's not a kazayas for every single person and one animal. Obviously, you see that eating is not ma'akiv. So that would be the source that Reb Nosson is who Rav is like. It says no, maybe there's a different why. Because you have what's called di'i. Di'i mim shechihani. If these people would withdraw, which you're allowed to do, you're allowed to withdraw from being counted on the Korban Pesach. Chazlan, it's fit for these. If these people withdraw, Chazlan, it's fit for these. In other words, it really comes out that this Korban Pesach is fit for everyone in Klal Yisrael, because who are you going to exclude? So therefore, although no one is kind of getting off from that list, they're all going to be exempt, because technically you could be fit. If everybody jumped off ship and you're the last guy holding a stock in this animal, you will have a gazayas. So maybe that's why it's going to work. But if the meat became tamei, like Rav's case, that's not fit for even any one person. How do you know Reb Nosson would hold that eating the Pesach is not ma'akiv? Maybe eating Pesach is ma'akiv, but it has to at least be technically possible. When the meat is tamei, it's not even technically possible. So the Rebbe says, Gemara, you're right. Or Reb Nosson, a different source of Reb Nosson. The time they go in the brayso. Nimnu lo chabur achas. Let's say there was one group that was listed on the Korban Pesach that each person had a kizayis. And then there's another group that goes and gets listed on that same original animal, which Rishonim sheshlin kizayis. So the first group, who there was enough meat for each one to have an olive size, so eichlin, they eat from it, but unless it's Pesach Shen, they exempt from making Pesach Shen. Achroinim, says the Tanakama, the later group, She'elam Kzayis, I don't know who you spoke to when you called up for the appointment with the Korban Pesach, but you guys, this Korban was already booked. You guys overbooked. There was no room for any meat over here. So the second group, She'elam says, they don't have a Kzayis of meat for any one of them. They obviously don't get to eat from it. They have to bring a Pesach Shen. That's what Tanakama holds. Because you didn't have a Korban Pesach. Reb Nosson, he says, no, he actually says both groups are exempt from bringing a Pesach Sheni, because the blood was already sprayed. So you see that even though the second group did not have what to eat, as long as there was nim on it, so that's the source of Rav. Says the Gemara, wait a second, I could say the same way I rejected the first right. Maybe there's different, because the first group would withdraw because they could, it would technically be fit for the second group, so it's not like it's not possible. It's possible I would have had meat. So maybe it's not a right to Rav, who's talking about a case where it's not possible. Says he, well, no, that cannot be a rejection, because in case that would be the case, then listening the words of the brayso should have been of Reb Nosson, since they're fit to withdraw, and then the other ones would be able to still be there and get. Oh, that's why they fulfilled the obligation by the Evid. Why are you saying the word because the blood was already sprayed? Shema Mina, obviously Reb Nosson was telling us, Badam telling us it depended on the spraying of the blood. Because it's only the dam, but the eating is not ma'akiv, and therefore that's the source of Rav that he's saying that it's going to be like that of Reb Nosson. Now, on that the Gemara asks, fine, I understand where Rav was coming from when he was explaining that imzara kurza, even though the Mishnah says that if the meat became tummy, not supposed to spray the blood. If you did, after that the meat valid like Reb Nosson. But my duchkid the Rav. But what was pushing Rav the Mukim Lamasin that was explaining the halacha Mishnah? They were saying that it's puzzle if you don't go ahead and have the meat, that it's only likatchila, only initially, because going like Reb Nosson holds b'di eved, eating the Pesach Namakiv. Why did you not make a Rabbanan? Why did you say like the Tanakama Reb Nosson, the Rabbanan, David Namalai, and say that even after the fact, if the meat became tummy, it's not going to be valid because the achil is ma'akiv. Why do you have to say it like Reb Nosson? Says Gemara, no, Rav Masnin Kashise. Because the word in the Mishnah bothered him. Amai, why does the Mishnah say in Zarikas Adam that if the meat became tummy, you don't spray the blood? That sounds like initially what you shouldn't do. Don't spray the blood. Listening puzzle, say stronger. Say it's invalid. It's done. No more, nothing to talk about. No, rather from the wording of the Mishnah, it sounds like you don't spray it initially. But after the fact that you do, and if after the fact that you do, that was Razalacha, who's that like? That's like Reb Nassan who holds that, but the Yavad, Achil is not ma'akev. Now the Gemara, once we introduce Reb Nassan, the Gemara asks, Reb Nassan, if that's the case, that eating the korban pesach is not ma'akev, so ish lefi achlei lamali. Why do you do with the pasuk that says, every man according to what he eats? Which, as the Mefarshim explains, it sounds like as if Achil is ma'akev. As like you have to have eaters, but you just told me eating is not ma'akev in the essence of the korban pesach. So the Gemara, no, it's teaching the being gaber the chazal achila. It has to be a person that's at least fit to eat. You're right, you don't have to actually eat. And if the meat became tummy, therefore the it's going to be valid. But you have to have someone who's fit to eat. In contrast to, let's say, an elderly person or a sick person, that then it wouldn't be valid. Now, based on this, the Gemara asks, Man tam l'hadatan rabban. So who's the time of the following price? Shachtu la'achlos. Let's say you slaughtered a korban for the eaters, but you sprayed the blood with the machshava of those who cannot eat it. So the halacha is a pesach as kasha. Korban pesach is always going to be kasha, which, as Rashi explains, the Gemara assumes right now, the way the wording sounds like, by saying ha pesach atzmoi, sounds like, okay, to spray the blood, to sacrifice the fats, that's okay. But to eat, you can't. Because it sounds like only the pesach is going to be valid, but for you to eat, it's not going to be. And still it says, still a person fulfilling his obligation with that korban pesach. Well, come on, who is this brisa like? Name Reb Nassan. It would seem to be like Reb Nassan, who says that even though you can't eat it, but you don't have to eat it to fulfill your obligation. V'lo Rabban is not going to Rabbanan. Because for a whole different reason. Ein machshavas oichlin, a machshava of problems regarding eaters. Let's say you have in mind for a sick person, elderly person who cannot eat it. That machshava of doing it for the non-eaters is not a psul bezrika by the spraying of the blood. Because Rashi explains, ish lefi achle, which tells us that you have to have it according to eaters, is only written in the context of the shechita of the korban pesach. But if you have a machshava regarding the zrika, it's not a problem. So it's going to be permitted even to eat. So of course, even like Rabban Salat, Reb Nassan, you actually could eat it because it's not a machshava psul, and therefore it's even like Rabban. Says okay, who's the time of the following brisa that says if a person was sick when the animal was being slaughtered, but he was well, he was healthy when the blood was being sprayed, or the other way around. Let's say when the animal was being slaughtered, he was healthy, but he was sick when it was being sprayed. Right? I mean, he has to be healthy because if he's not healthy, he's a chayla, and he's not considered eater. So says the Bryce, you cannot slaughter or spray the blood for the individual owner of the korban pesach until he's healthy from when it was slaughtered till the zrika. At any point in time, he cannot be sick. Says the Gemara, come on, who's this like? Name Rabban he, v'lo Reb Nassan. Shall we say this like Rabban, not like Reb Nassan? Why? So this explains. The Gemara understands that since we see Reb Nassan is very lenient, and that he doesn't require the meat to be able to be eaten, so also here the Gemara is assuming that he wouldn't be concerned if the owner wasn't fit to eat it at the time it was being sprayed, as long as during the time of the shechita it was able to be for him to eat it, he was healthy then. So even though later he was sick, it would seem to be like Rabbanan, not like Reb Nassan. The Gemara says no, I felt Reb Nassan, even like Reb Nassan. We need a person that's eligible to eat, and because when it says ish lefi achle is going on the person, that the person has to be someone that could eat, and he has to be able to eat the whole time from the shechita through the zrika. But regarding the korban pesach, you're right. We're not bothered if it's fit or not, which could still be like Reb Nassan. So the Gemara again, another man who's like the following brisa like. The brisa says, shachti b'tahara. If let's say when you slaughter the korban pesach, everything was tahar, but after it was slaughtered, the owners became tummy, which is a problem. That's what the whole Pesach Sheni is from the owners were tummy. But the owner became tummy after it was slaughtered. So says the Brisa, okay, Yizr Kadam B'Tahar, continue to do the avodah, the korban Pesach, by spraying the blood in a state of purity. I mean, the Kahanim have to be tar, the Klei Sharis has to be tar. But the owners not be able to eat the meat in their state of tummy. So the Kaman, who is this Brisa like? So Amr Rebbe Lazar, he says, B'Machlekes Shenoya, this price is contingent on a Machlekes, because Reb Nassan. Now, look at Rashi, where he says that, what does Reb Nassan hold? Oh, eating the korban pesach is not ma'akev. Moreover, Rebbe Lazar, The Amar Rabbi Lazar holds that Rabbi Nassim doesn't even require a person because he explains the prior brises like Rabbi Lazar, like Rabbanan, not like Rabbi Nassim. Meaning, we were interpreting the previous brise to say, oh, it could even be like Rabbi Nassim, because although you don't have to actually eat the Karban Pesach, you have to be gabi the chazal. On that, this Rabbi Lazar is saying that no, it's not true. Rabbi Nassim doesn't require eating at all, not the meat, not the person. You don't have to have any eligibility for eating. So this brise that's saying that the person himself is tummy and still you can fulfill the obligation is like Rabbi Nassim, who holds that you don't even need gabi the chazal achila. So it doesn't have to be fit to eat. So once you spray the blood, he fulfilled his obligation. So that's what's different than the previous interpretations of the Gemara. For Rabbi Yochanan, he says, no, I felt Rabbanan. You can even say this price is even like Rabbanan. How can it be like Rabbanan? We could barely even scrape it out that it's like Rabbi Nassim. It has to be that we're saying different, that the Gavi doesn't have the Chazachila. Says Rabbi Yochanan, you know why? What are we talking about here? We're talking about B'tzibur. We're talking about where the most of the public became Tamei between the Shechita and the Zrika. Now, how would that be? How would most of Klal Yisrael become Tamei between the... I know sometimes the Gemara could come up with some interesting cases. How come most of Klal Yisrael become Tamei between the Shechita? It says Rashi, for example, if the Nasi died. If the Nasi died, all Klal Yisrael has an obligation to become Tamei by his Levayim. So, between the Shechita and the Zrika, the Tzibur became Tamei. The fellow Tamei Namei Avdi. That even in Tamei they do it, because it's the Tzibur. We said the Tzibur does have Pesach in the state of Tumah. So therefore it is a Gavi the Chazal Chila. Because as we said in our Mishnah, that Pesach is different in the previous Mishnah. Pesach is different than all the Kabbalah Tzibur. Not only is brought in the state of Tumah, you even eat in the state of Tumah. Okay, so it's a Gavi the Chazal Chila. So even like Rabbanan, because it's Gavi the Chazal Chila. So he's going, wait a second, if the Tzibur became Tamei, so then Amai Ena Basa Nechel B'Tumah. So why are you telling me that not only are you saying he fulfills obligation, but you tell me, but the meat cannot be eaten in the state of Tumah. Why can the meat not be eaten in the state of Tumah? You told me that if the Tzibur told me that they could eat the meat. That was what our prior Mishnah said. So why are you saying not only do they fulfill the obligation, but then why can't they eat it? Says Gemara, you're right. Technically they should be able to eat it. But as a Gzeira, it's a concern because of this unique case. Shana, maybe next year, you're going to have Yitma Abayim, the owners, let's say the Tzibur, will become Tamei, let's say another Nasi. La'achazrika, after the blood was thrown. I mean, it's very hard to differentiate between knowing that we knew that there was a problem after the Shechita, but to remember that last year we became Tamei before the Zrika, and next year it's going to be a few moments later after the Zrika. Remember, they're going to say, okay, Shtakit, last year, Loinet Manu Bachalnu, weren't we Tamei and we ate the Karban Pesach anyway, even though the Shechita was done in a state of Tahara, and we became Tamei only afterwards? Okay, Hashtanami, here also, even though the Shechita and the Zrika was done in Tahara, that also, Nechel, that we should eat the basar in the state of Tumah. But, they're not going to realize the Shtakid last year, Kis Darig Dam, when the blood was being sprayed by Lam Tameim Havam, they were already Tamei. So that was quote unquote what's called Pesach Haba B'Tumah. Pesach Haba B'Tumah, our prior Mishnah told us, is permitted to be eaten. But Hashda Ba'alim Tahir Hava, this year, the owners are actually tar during the Shechita and the Zrika. The whole permissibility of eating the Karban Pesach in the state of Tumah was only because of the permissibility of doing the Tzibur, which is the Karban Pesach, in the state of Tumah. So we let you then eat it in the state of Tumah. But if the Avaida of the Shechita and the Zrika was done in the state of Tahara, and they became Tumah only afterwards, you actually are not allowed to eat the Karban Pesach. So because of that confusion of this case, that's why they said they cannot eat it. So although technically you could, but that's why not. Now the Gemara continues up by Testament Aleph and says, if you want, you could say, which it's actually not another answer, it's really just adding on. We had originally had to ask the question on Rab. We said, wait a second, who is he going like when he says, in Zara Kurza, if you sprayed it, even though the meat was tummy, which technically it seems like you need the meat, who is he going like? So we said, he's going like Rav Nassim. Nassim says, even the Pesach is not ma'akir. Now the Gemara says, Rav Da'ama, this is Rav says that if you sprayed the blood, even though the meat is tummy, it's going to be hurtz with the Evid. We can find a different time that he's going like, it's Kirby Yeshua. Then he also holds eating the Karban Pesach is not ma'akir. It's kind of like Linda Bryson. Shloimy, he says, all kabbanas in the Torah. Benching mabasa b'chelav kaim, whether if the meat became tummy, but the chelav is still tar. Benching b'chelav bazakayim, whether if the fat became tummy, but the meat is still around. Then zerk you could spray the blood again, because even though you need tarti, the mata and the nitter, you have a nitter, either the meat or the chelav. But nazir, what's called the shalmi nazir, the nazir when he finishes nazir, so he brings a shlama. Now, the inception of the shalmi nazir is we need it to be eaten. But why? Because you need to cook it Why do you need to cook it to eat it? Because one of the processes, the procedures that the Nazir has to do, his hair that he cut off, he has to actually put beneath the pot that the Shlom is cooking in, like it says in Mamid Bavav, he puts on the fire. Additionally, you have to do tenufa, which is an avoid of elevation, on the zroy b'shilu, the cooked foreleg, which the kohen gets, you have to do an avoid on. So obviously you need the basa to be tar when you're spraying the blood, so that you could end up doing the mitzvahs that you have to do with it, regarding throwing his hair beneath the pot, picking up the cooked foreleg. So regarding Nazir, Va'isa Pesach, which obviously has the same halacha too, we said the basa has to be tar there also, because the whole point of the Korban Pesach is to eat the meat. Regarding those two cases, it's different. If the chayil became tamei and the meat's still around, okay, then you could throw the blood because you still have the nitter and you also have the meat which you need. But nitma basa b'chayil kaim. But if the meat became tamei, even if the chayil is still around, ein zarek sedam, then you don't spray the blood because again the whole purpose is for the basa. If the basa is not around, then you're not going to spray the blood. V'mzark, and if you did have a spray, hurdsa. That's exactly the halacha of the Mishnah. Just adding on the case of Nazir, it's not ma'akiv, which is like Rav. It is going to work after the fact. And then that's why we already brought the source of Rabbi Yeshua, but the Brisa just finishes off. But let's say the owner became tummy from a dead person, where now he's not able to eat the meat in the evening because he's tummy for 7 days. Then by both the Pesach and the Nazir lo yizrik, you should not spray it, as you're always not supposed to. But v'mzark, in this case, if you sprayed it, like hurts, it's not going to be even effective even after the fact, because although eating it is not ma'akiv, but like we said, you need a gavra the chazal achilvina. You need that the person should be eligible to eat it, and the Torah rejects a tummy nefesh in Pesach Sheni, and is not able to eat it. And by Nazir too, it says kiyamas meisalav. If a Nazir can come in contact with a dead person, it undoes his whole naziris, and if obviously he's not able to eat it, it's a whole the this puzzle. So therefore, it's lo hurts is not going to be effective. But again, one thing we see over here is that Rabbi Yeshua holds the eating Korban Pesach is not me'akiv b'di'evet, like we see in nitmo hurtza. If you zarak hurtza, so that's another time that Rav could be going like when he says that in zarak hurtza that if you spray the blood, it's going to be effective. Something to discuss in today's daf, in Pesachim Daf Ayin Ches, was we said that our Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yesi, who holds that there's no ritza on achilas, because the Gemara assumes that he holds like Rabbi Shua that holds you need both, because if you don't need both, why even discussing ritza tzitz on achilas? Now the problem is in our Mishnah we said that if it's brought in Torah, even though you can't eat it because it's tamei, because you're not merutza on achilas. So the Gemara says, now if you're going to say that Rabbi Yisi holds like Rabbi Eliezer, that no, you don't need basar, and you can do the damim without that. So then wait a second, why would you be saying that the tzitz not meratza on achilas if you don't need it anyway? Oh, that would be for a different halacha, to establish it in pigul or to exclude it from the laws of me'ilah. But the problem is you can't say that. What do you do with shtei halechem? There's nothing going on in the mizbeach. So, and it's all achilas. And he told me there's no ritz on achilas. How could he be the down mission? And if you're going to say that, we don't mean the shtei halechem itself. I mean what the carbon that's brought with it is what's going to go on the mizbeach, and that's merutza with the tumah. But that's shalmei tzibur, and shalmei tzibur was already mentioned as one of the 5. It would be 4 then instead of 5. And you also cannot say, the Rabbi holds tumah hutra b'tzibur, and that's why it works because he holds it's duchliya, not hutra. So obviously, the Gemara concludes, you're right. Obviously, our mission is not like Rabbi Yisi. Then we explain a different Rabbi Yisi, I mean the same Rabbi Yisi, for what he said in the previous stuff, which actually comes back to the Rabbi Yisi we discussed in this stuff. But he says, regarding the machlekes Rabbi Shua and Rabbi Eliezer, regarding do you need basar to have the dam or not? He says, I see like Rabbi Eliezer and I see like Rabbi Shua, which didn't make sense because you're saying contradictory opinions. Now, you can't say that he was saying that it's logical that they disagree by both because the primary is by zvachim. So that would make sense that also menachas, you can't say menachas and also zvachim. You also cannot say that he was saying I hold like Rabbi Eliezer when it becomes tummy, but I hold like Rabbi Shua when it gets burnt and gets lost, because if it's tummy, then I would say like Rabbi Eliezer that it's going to be okay, because why would it be okay? Because tzitz muratza, but it's not true. Then we're talking about the meat. Rabbi Yisi holds tzitz not muratza on achilas. So why would that make a reason why we hold like Rabbi Eliezer? But in the case of nitma, you also cannot differentiate between it being b'tzibur b'yachid. You also cannot differentiate between it was like a chil b'di'evet. Rather, the Gemara says the machlekes is regarding that in the case of avid b'sarif b'di'evet, there Rabbi Shua holds not going to be valid b'di'evet. Rabbi Eliezer is, and that's where Rabbi Yisi says I hold like Rabbi Eliezer b'di'evet, even by the case I got lost and burnt. We went to the next Mishnah. If the meat of the Korban Pesach became tummy, we said that you don't throw the blood by Mikdash, and it's not like that. If the meat became basar but the chayil was around, then you would throw the blood, even if one could be sure, because you have the nitter of the chayil. Now, Rav said that if you threw the blood after the fact, it's going to be valid. Now, why did he say it's like Reb Nosson? Because the words in the Mishnah bothered him, that it said that you're not zorik at Saddam. That sounds like a tchila. That it's going to be a problem. So, who's he like that the eating of the Pesach is not going to be ma'akiv? Either like Reb Nosson, which we brought many brises that also we said man tan lahod the Torah, we wrote many brises out like Reb Nosson, or it's like a Yeshua who he also brought a source that he holds like ma'akva, and therefore like we said by the Chacham Pesach that imzar kurza, so it could be like either one of those tanoim that Rav was saying like think to any time for hosting us.